Hey, glory to Jesus Christ. Glory forever. Hope y'all can hear me. Yeah, gonna hear a lot of noises today. So we moved another one of our birds down here. So now we've got 4 birds here in the Orthoanalytica studios. And one of them really likes talking when other people are talking. Doesn't know how to take turns. And the usual dogs and stuff. So it's good to be with y'all. I missed y'all last week. I was recovering from Thanksgiving. I'm still recovering from Thanksgiving. I hope y'all had a great Thanksgiving. So today we are going to talk about whatever comes into my fool head. And the plan is to talk probably about Dungeons and Dragons and political science and Orthodoxy. Now, those of you who are familiar with any of those topics, those are huge, right? There are a whole podcast devoted to small parts of each of those subjects. So obviously we're not going to go into depth. But there you go. That's what I've been doing. And so that's probably what we'll end up talking about, stream of conscience fashion. But before we get there, let me switch over. Hey, here I am. See? Look pretty much the same as I usually do. And welcome to the Orthoanalytica studios. So before we start, let's go through our prayerful meditation, hesychastic Jesus prayer. So for 1 minute, we're going to recite the Jesus prayer together, and we'll do it using square breathing, right? And if my timing is up to snuff, we'll do about 3 of them. All right? So ready? Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Last time together. Now breathe in that love and that peace. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly and let that relaxation and peace just imbue you. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Okay, let's get back to our breathing. Yeah, there we go. So, if you only do this once a week or once in a blue moon when you listen to this, it's good. It's still, has benefits. But if you do it as a regular part of your routine, what happens is if you take a break like we just did, even a small one, a 1 minute one, you're drawing from something, an experience, a ritual, a part of your constitution that is already there waiting to be drawn on, right? You're not creating it from scratch. It's already there. So, and the benefit of a regular habit of quiet prayer like that, they're immense, right? It's, So I teach whole classes on that. I'm not going to get distracted. If you want to hear more about it, there are plenty of podcasts. I talked to Carrie Frost, professor, doctor, just a few weeks ago about it and how good it is, not just for monks, but for lay people. So I encourage you to make it a part of your regular routine. So I'm a priest, right? That's why I wear this cool dress. I get to wear this bling, right? Yeah, this is my special cross. So, there you go. Sorry, hit the microphone. And some people may think, so that's what I do. I mean, that's kind of my job. Is I pray and think deep thoughts, and I, read books that'll help me be a better priest. The church fathers, liturgical books, and so on. And that is a regular part of my life, and taking care of people. Although that used to be a real big part of my routine. But here, because I serve two smaller parishes, and one I'm only really attached to, and the other is 2.5 hours away, man, it's checking on people's part of it, but not the bedside care like I'm used to. Anyway, so what do I do with my time? Well, you know what? I'm not a good man. I can only spend so much time praying and doing that kind of stuff. There's a lot of other stuff that fills my day, and Lord willing, I do it prayerfully, and I, intentionally, and in a way that glorifies God, and brings His logos, His pattern, into the world. Right? That's the goal, is so that every moment is sanctified to that purpose of harmony and of peace and the glory of God. But that can take on a lot of different shapes and sizes. And so the way that I've filled most of my time for the last 1.5 years is as a political scientist, right? Well, I'm not really a political scientist. People say, no, you don't. You don't have a PhD. Yeah, right, I know. I've taken a whole lot of classes, but I don't have a PhD. I've got 10, 12 years of graduate school as a political scientist, but you're right, I don't have a PhD. I'm an INFP. It's that actually getting it done that seems to be the problem. But anyways, so I read a lot of books. If you can read the books behind me, they're not about the church directly. The ones that you can see over this shoulder here, let's see, that's my left shoulder. Those are about ethnicity and politics, right, and populism. Yeah, and the ones below it, those do have something to do with religion. The purple one is Durkheim, right? But I read a lot and I write a lot. And maybe if we get to it, we'll talk about some of the insights that political science gives, not just to the world. Of course, you'd expect that, right? Like what we're going through right now. I'm a comparative guy, right? So I study not just America, but broadly. So you look for patterns and how stuff works and doesn't work. Because the United States may be an exceptional case in some reasons, right? We may have variables that line up in a way that they don't line up in other places. So right now, we're going through this presidential election, yeah, and talking about elections, right? And boy, we're not talking about elections. We're yelling about elections, right? There's no discussion going on. There's just completely siloed. And so within it, they're talking about elections and how ridiculous the claims of the other are, right? And so as a comparativist, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get this. Not only do I get the polarization and how that works, but I also, when I say, oh, so there's an accusation of electoral fraud. Having studied elections in other countries, fraud and elections, I mean, those two can sometimes go together. No, yes, they do. I mean, elections draw fraud the way that, elections draw money, right? Unless you limit it somehow, that's what you're going to get naturally, right? That's why international groups send election observers to other countries to make sure that there's some kind of coherence. That's why when someone goes to vote in some countries, they'll dye their thumbs, right? So that they can't vote twice. Yeah. So there are all these, it's a known fact that elections attract corruption, right? So you have to build against it. And there are certain, as in any system, the good fraudster is going to look for the kinks in the system, or is going to create a decentralized system that naturally, goes at the system exploiting chinks, right? To get in there and try to make a difference, right? And by the way, that's the original meaning of conspiracy, is a lot of people who are after the same thing. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a closeted conspiracy, because that's one of the things that people say, oh, you can't have election fraud big enough to sway election because it'd take too much of a conspiracy. Okay, as a comparativist, I don't know look, and by the way, I'm agnostic about American politics, right? All I'm saying is that as a political scientist, yeah, I can come up with a story about why there'd be fraud and why there wouldn't, right? You need data, and we just don't trust, nobody trusts the data. This side doesn't trust this side's data. This side doesn't trust this side's data. So there's, it's just ridiculous. And so the idea, though, and this is, me speaking, not as a priest or political scientist, this is just kind of the way I'm wired, to expect that there's some kind of magic with having an American election that would automatically just protect it by virtue of the integrity of our citizens from corruption. No, that's not enough. There have to be safeguards. And so, and it's a known fact, right? And so as Gail was saying about vaccine conspiracies, right? We know that there have been elections that have been won based on fraud, even in America, in some of our lifetimes, right? But knowing that has led to interest in increasing the integrity of elections. Why? Because it's a competitive system. If it weren't a competitive system, then only one side would be interested in integrity. But this is the work of Barbara Geddes, right, when she writes about how public reform works. When you have a competitive system, there is an interest for both sides to create an integral system, right? Now, when you're in power, you try to create it so that you can lord it over the other forever. But because there's such a balance of power, there is an interest in protecting against fraud, right? So what do you look for? If you're going to try and look for holes in a system, you look for new technology that's being used, right? And that's why the stories are all around new electronic technology and also new, mail-in technology. Are those exploitable, right? But ideally, this conversation would take place in the open, right, rather than treated as some kind of dogma versus heresy, dogma versus heresy, one side against the other. Right? And my inclination is to say, yeah, of course there was some fraud, and there wasn't a conspiracy to commit fraud. There's always local people interested in doing it. There are always people interested in swaying elections as best they can, looking for opportunities, right? But most of the people, most of the time, aren't looking to do that. And the system is built against it. So there you go. All right, so I'm not going to, if you're disappointed in that kind of waving of the hands, sorry about that. That's not my thing. I'm not a polemicist. I'm not an ideologue, right? I am I'm an evangelist, right? So I want these two silos to listen to each other, right? To trust one another and to be trustworthy towards the other. Because right now we're in this kind of dynamic, and it's got movement, right? And it's going to be self-reinforcing, is that neither side is acting trustworthy towards the other. So there are always reasons for not to trust now. So it's going to take an act of repentance, right? An act of love, an act of sacrifice to get us back together. And that's more than marketing. That's going to take more than marketing, right? All right, so that's enough about political science for now. Let's talk about something fun. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons, right? So that's the other thing that I'm doing right now. Yeah, so we've had this family. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 12 years old, right? Which, that's like, I don't know, what year was that? 79, right? Since early on, when the older kids in the Boylan family down the street, they were playing it. And they got my friend Tom, he saw it happen, and he's like, hey, look, there's this cool game. And we're like, let's do it, right? So, and with all that energy of pre-adolescent youth, right? Just learned everything we could, and had a great group, and it was cooperative storytelling, and it was adventurous, and it was just a whole lot of fun. Kept us out of trouble for the most part. And changes when you get older. So the game that I've been running for the last, on and off, this particular campaign has been going on for about a year. It's a family game, right? We love family time around games, right? And it does matter the game a little bit, because if we play Risk, I win and everybody cries. If we play Monopoly, I win, everybody cries, right? So you do have to be careful what game you pick. So you can pick games that are just completely, there's so little strategy involved, like Uno, right? Uno, the strategy of Uno is like so shallow, right? That it's great, and very few people cry on a regular basis, right? So that's nice. So games like that, but playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, it brings out something else. It brings out a dynamic, and it's a similar dynamic to some other games like Pandemic. If you played Pandemic. Yeah, there's this game called Pandemic where you try and save the world. That's another game, though, that we couldn't play together as a family. And it's a wonderful cooperative game. You're trying to work with the other scientists and players to try and come up with a cure and then implement that cure, right? Great premise, right? Boy, that never happened. And here's the problem. The problem is that my oldest son, Nick, is a genius. He's a genius. I mean, he's a genius, and it shows up in so many ways. So when it comes to games, he's a tactical genius. He can see how to maximize the potential of victory, right? And exactly what each player needs to do in order for that to happen. And and we're all interested in winning. So the game when we play as a family is basically, okay, Nick, what should we do? Right? Well, that's not great, right? And by the way, when we play Monopoly with Nick, what it ends up being is his genius shows up as evil genius, where he knows what he wants, and he will figure out how to frame it in such a way that you want it to, that there's no way that you could turn down a deal, right? Because it'd be completely against your interest. And so he's a lot of fun to play with, and he's part of this campaign. So when you play Dungeons and Dragons, you get that cooperative element. The party is trying to solve problems together. And what sorts of problems? Like in the board game Pandemic, you're trying to solve a pandemic. Well, basically stay alive and, I don't know, go up to the next level, get cool stuff, do great deeds, right? But staying alive is a big part of it. And the nature of the problem is almost completely determined by the mind of the game master. In the case of Dungeons and Dragons, we usually call it the dungeon master, right? And that's me. Yeah, I'm the dungeon master. So what kinds of problems do I throw in front of them? Oh, you know what kinds of problems I throw in front of them. Oh man, it's so much fun. So if you listen to the show with Colin from about 2 or 3 weeks ago where we talked about the Horus Heresy, right, and the cosmology there, and about how there was this warp that was just one off, right? It's another dimension, and it's one off from our created plane. And in some places, it's very thin, the line between the chaos, the warp, and the created world, our world, is very thin, right? And it bleeds over. And when it bleeds over, hilarity ensues, right? Because stuff goes not just sideways, stuff just gets weird. Not quite as weird as in the restaurant in the universe, that infinity drive, right? But goes weird. So that's the kind of world they're exploring right now, is a world where there are people who are trying to further thin out the barrier, right? And so weird stuff is already happening. Every time that they do a spell, they have to roll to see how strong the effect is and in what direction, right? So, for example, if you have a healing spell, right? So the cleric goes and lays hands on somebody, and that's usually just, the only random part of that is how much damage is healed, right? So dice are involved, right? But in this case, first you roll the dice to see which way that presence of chaos is going to affect it, if at all. So on a 20-sided dice, if it's kind of in the middle, no effect. If it's high, it's going to be stronger in a positive way for the caster. If it's low, which is always bad, almost always bad in Dungeons and Dragons, low, then it's gonna be good for the other side. And so, for example, one of the players played by my oldest daughter, is a fighter. And that fighter now has 2 reptilian legs. Right? Because chaos just does weird stuff. Anyways, so Nick is part of this as well. And his role is, because he's a bigger than life personality. He's just got this life about him. He has to rein it in a little bit. And especially since we're playing over Discord, right? So, which is, for those of you who don't know, that's a technology used for, it's like Skype for lots of people. And that's how we use it. And he's playing a bard that is chaotic neutral. That's a lot of fun. Anyway, so back to just the idea of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So why is it that people like it? Well, they like it because it's fun. It's cooperative storytelling. It's a challenge that's not insurmountable, that if you work together and you're lucky and good, you can overcome them and go on to bigger challenges, right? Now, why is it that when people hear, oh, there's a priest that plays Dungeons and Dragons, there's people like, what? You know, and they kind of wonder. It's like when they find out that I'm a married priest, right? When we were in Rhode Island, that was a big deal. Your dad's a priest and he's married, right? And you're like, yeah, and it's okay. We're Orthodox, you know. It's allowed. You know, a priest playing Dungeons and Dragons, and here I am. I'm coming out about it. I play Dungeons and Dragons, right? Played a lot, and I remember growing up, it was an issue. It was an issue. I grew up in Georgia, and there were some people who weren't allowed to play, right? And it's similar but worse than the idea that your kids shouldn't be allowed to read Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or whatever. And the idea is that it's because it's fantasy. For one, and in some traditions, like the Orthodox tradition, there's a distrust among many, certainly in theology, monastic theology, a distrust of the imagination. And the imagination is what is completely engaged when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's the imagination trying to imagine this made-up world and its dynamics, its cosmology, its politics. You know, you've got made-up characters, right? Most of which, you know, many of which are not human, right? So you got elves, dwarves, orcs, and now a zillion others, right? Can't even keep track of them. So there's a distrust there. Oh no, these kids are using their imagination. Be careful. But another one is that it involves magic, okay? And I just said, you know, not just magic. That was the big deal, though, was magic. So what is magic? Well, in the real world, it's a cult, right? And it's not something that Christians are to be engaged in, right? There's a prohibition on magic, on pharmacia, right? On using components to bring about a spiritual state, should we say? Anyways, so it really did. It revolved around that magic. And if you looked in the old books, if you looked at spells, there would be spell components and stuff. And so when an outsider would see that, they'd say, like, oh my goodness, this is a gateway drug to the occult, right? And for clerics, right, you need to have a cleric in every party because they're the ones that heal, unless you're going to have some kind of source of healing potions or something, because you're always losing hit points. So how does clerics get their power? Well, they're devoted to, you know, a little g god or a pantheon, right? Or an idea, maybe. I guess there could be a platonic provider of spell strength. Anyway, so there you go. You know, it's a gateway drug to idolatry. Okay, that's the concern. And here I want to share, if you're watching this, if you're not listening to this on the podcast, if you're actually watching it, as soon as my mouse starts working again, I'm going to switch over. This is a what's called a chick track, right? And these, they were all over the place in the South. Like if you'd go to a convenience store or something, there would usually be a chick track or two somewhere conspicuous where you could pick one up and read it. And they're about all kinds of theological topics. And this one is called Dark Dungeon. And it gave voice to this fundamentalist concern about Dungeons and Dragons. And so they've got, if you're just listening, you can't see this, but the first frame has a group playing around a table, right? And the conversation, the game master says, "Okay, wizard, cast your spell." "Okay, dungeon master, my spell is light blinds the monster." And then on the next one, the game master says, "The thief, Blackleaf, did not find the poison trap, and I declare her dead." And then the player just freaks out, stands up, "No, not Blackleaf. No, I'm not. I'm going to die. Please don't make me quit the game. Please don't. Somebody save me. You can't do this." And then another player says, "Marcy, get out of here. You're dead. You don't exist anymore." And the game master's an adult. And in the next frame, you have the game master and just that player who said, "You're dead," right? Saying, "Debbie, your cleric has been raised to the 8th level. I think it's time that you learn how to really cast spells." "You mean you're going to teach me how to have the real power?" "Yes, you have the personality for it now." In the next frame, they've got these hooded figures around a pentagram with an altar on one side, and they're introducing Debbie to the society. And the frame says, "The intense occult training through D&D prepared Debbie to accept the invitation to enter a witch's coven. I've brought Elfstar to become a priestess and witch." That's the game master. And then a bald man is shaking Debbie's hand, Elfstar's hand. "Welcome, Elfstar. Now you'll become a priestess of the craft and of the temple of Diana." And, hilarity ensues, right? And the point is not just to keep people from playing D&D and to recognize how dangerous it can be. And the characters, the person in the comic strip whose character died goes on to commit suicide. It's really very sad, right? But the goal is to get you to the last frame of the track where, it's the believer's prayer and the logic of salvation. And, that's what every single one of these chick tracks ends with. And so if you're a parent or just someone who's interested, who learns about Dungeons and Dragons through a chick track, they hear that people are playing this, my kids are interested, and then they read that chick track. So, there's a psychological finding, a psychological regularity in how our minds work when it comes to how the first thing we see about an issue, a topic, sets the agenda for how that is how it's perceived. And so when it comes to people, that's why we say, your first impression is so important. So, don't mess it up. But imagine this, right? So the parent reads this and then goes and looks at D&D books, like the books about how to run a wizard character, and sees that there are spell components, and you can cast negative spells, and and it just reaffirms, right? It confirms. It goes into confirmatory bias, right? It confirms what the person is expecting to see, right? So you always, if you want to sell this to somebody, if you want to work against it, do it that way. If you want to go for it, say, it's just like Risk, right? So, the news, it was set to do this as well, right? So you would get these sensationalist reports about people getting lost in steam tunnels, right? And these are the early LARPers before they went to before they moved to Portland. What live action LARPers, what LARPers would do is they would, sorry, that was a political comment, forgive me. So they would dress up and do this kind of thing. But man, they're missing out what really happens around a D&D table. So what is it that happens? Well, the way to frame it, the way to frame an understanding of why it's so popular, at least among people who like it, is it's popular for the same reasons and more that books like Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the Bible, all these things are popular, right? Why are they popular? Why are those things popular? Because they're cool, for one, duh. Oh, let me get back over to, so you're not staring at that awful chick track forever. Because they're cool. I mean, it's a lot of fun, right? Just to play games with other people. There's a social aspect to it. And I suspect if you ask any Dungeons and Dragons player, role-playing game player, to list why they like doing it, they may share the same 5 as pretty much everybody else, but they'll rank them differently, right? So the social aspect is huge for me. It's a small group setting, perfect for an introvert, right? And it's with, people that you can trust, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can be silly with, where that's kind of part of the deal, right? So that's really important is building these ties. And, you go through a lot together. Sorry. You know what the drink of choice is in the Old Man Club? It's tonic water. Here's an advertisement for tonic water. Tonic water. It doesn't just taste good. It'll protect you from the COVID. I read it on the internet. Hey, I drink it every day. I haven't got COVID. Data. That's me kidding, by the way. So back to the 5 reasons. So sociability, that's really big. So, and this is why it's better than reading even Tolkien or Charles Williams or C.S. Lewis or, Rawlings, whatever. Is because, so there you read a book and then you share your experience. You talk about it with people. And just look at how popular Father Andrew Damick's Amon Sul podcast is. Right? Why is it popular? Because we have this shared experience of Tolkien that we like to experience with other people, right? So when we hear Father Andrew and his guest just geeking all about Tolkien, right? And Orthodoxy, another of our favorite things, we're part of that. We're geeking out with them, yeah? So it's cool, right? That's that sociability thing. Well, when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you're living it. You're living that cool factor, yeah? So that's one. And if you want to, because this is live streamed, you can type in any comments or something if you'd like, and say what's cool about it for you. For another, there's the creative aspect to it, right? The creative aspect to it. And when you're reading, you experience creativity. So Tolkien wrote about us being made in the image of God, and one of the corollaries of that is that we are little creators. We were made to engage the world as creators. And part of this is like I was saying, we're patterning the world around us. And through the way that we pattern our relationships with each other, with the environment, we are bringing the Logos. We are bringing that love, that harmony, that virtue to the world, right? We are taking the pattern of Eden and establishing it throughout the cosmos, right? That's us acting as little creators. Well, we do it, Tolkien did it when he was writing, and he described that. He's got some great essays on that, yeah? And if you're interested in this, Nicholas Kotar, Deacon Nicholas Kotar, he's a writer, does a great job, his Raven Sun series, his essays, and now his podcast, Nicholas Kotar. Check him out, very good, right? And thinks a lot about this creativity thing. See, I'm not a deep thinker. And when you are doing that, when you are acting in the role that you were made for, it's cool. There's a sense of self, of being in the moment, of being virtuous in the moment, right? Even though it's just making stuff up with other people. And it's, and I hear my kids doing this. So now they're not around, so I can talk about them. The youngest is the one who's doing it now because she's at that age. When she plays Minecraft with her friends online, right? They're using it as an opportunity to role play. They're not just creating worlds in the engineering sense that Minecraft allows you to do. They're filling that world with ideas and relationships and so on, right? And it's amazing. They do the same thing in Animal Jam. It's so funny to watch. It's a natural instinct. Some people have it stronger than others. I get that. So in the D&D sense, what happens is the game master will put out the situation. This is a situation. And then each of the players has a character that they develop a backstory and a personality, strengths and weaknesses, right? All these things, right? So the character like in Tolkien, right? And a lot of times they're patterned on, it's a Frankenstein of bits and pieces of some of their favorite villains and heroes from stories that they've read. They put them together, and then they interact with this scene that the Dungeon Master has given them, and with each other, right? Do you see how good this is? And how useful it is for the development of a healthy psychology. Yeah? So, there you go. So it's like medicine. It's good for you. That's reason number 2. It's like medicine. Good for you. A little bit of sugar makes it go down better. A little bit of good storytelling makes that hard work of learning how to live as a human being in the world a little bit easier. Yeah, and then there's just the heroic nature of it. We're involved in a heroic struggle every day. Every moment, I choose whether I'm going to act for good or for lazy, for good or even for ill, right? Every moment, I'm redeeming the time or not, right? And that is a virtuous struggle. It is. And sometimes it's more obvious than others, right? It comes down to a moment, right, where a certain virtue is called for, and you either step up and offer that virtue, or you don't, right? And if you don't, there's repentance, right? This is the great trajectory, right? That's what you get written large in role-playing is, at least in every meeting, in every, we play for an hour and a half once a week. That's our plan anyways. And sometime during that hour and a half, at least every player is going to be tested at least once, right? And to exercise heroic sacrifice, some kind of virtue or not, right? And the neat thing about doing this in a role-playing game is that you can see the consequences of success and failure without suffering, any kind of psychological damage. Right. So, it may happen. Look, sorry, I know you need my help. My character's down to 1 hit point. That orc breathes on me. I'm joining you in the dirt, right? I'm going to go back, I'm going to get help, and hopefully, things will work out, right? So you run, and there you go. Or you say, I've got 1 hit point, yeah, but I'm a hero. And you go out there, and boom, that orc breathes on you, and you're dead in the dirt right next to your partner there. Anyways, so you get an opportunity, and then there's the recovery. And the recovery, not just in the world. Remember, this isn't just a single person interacting with the world. It's all these other people who are bringing their own ideas to it. And a good dungeon master won't completely flesh out every aspect of the world. Rather, they'll give just enough data that the players' minds populate it using their own imagination, right? And so what you have is, and it's perfect postmodernism, right? So the world that's created is a subjective construct of all the players together with the game master, right? And the game master has ultimate authority. They can say, oh, you thought that the world was that way? Tragic mistake. Here's another piece of data. You're all dead, right? No, just kidding. So Dungeons and Dragons, man, it's such a fun game. It really is. Now, are there ways that it can go bad? Yeah, yeah. Like one of the people playing in our family game, 9 years old, right? It would be traumatic, if her character died, right? So, you know, we're very careful about that, right? And also careful about, the sorts of things that we put in front of her, right? That it's within tolerable limits for her, because it is hard. You get attached to your character. So this character here. As soon as I get my mouse working again, yes. Let's see here. Hero Forge is a website you can go to, heroforge.com, and this is an advertisement. They're not paying me. They're not giving me any discounts or anything. But you create your own character, and it's got so much nuance, things that you can change, right? So this is my character in the other campaign, and this is the one that we used to run with the people that I used to work with when I worked for the government. And that was great because everyone had a military background. And so the way that game usually went, there was more tactics than I was usually comfortable with, and a little bit more gaming. This was 3.5. We were playing when 3.5 came in. And okay, that's a little bit of geek talk. The rules have evolved over time. And 3.5, I think they were at the max of their, let's turn this into a purely tactical game, right? And some people love that, right? People who really love playing Warhammer, that's one of the things that they love. It's a fantastic tactical game. Well, that's not why I play D&D. I play D&D for the cooperative storytelling. So this character, Eden, was part of a campaign that a friend was running. And Eden is a bard, right? And bards are neat. They're not particularly good at anything really, but they're pretty good at a lot of stuff. So pretty good at sword play, pretty good at sneaking around, pretty good at magic. There you go, right? A lot of fun to play. And what Eden would do, the way his personality developed was because the person playing him, me, couldn't stand all the tactical detail. He would just do something random every once in a while, right? Jump through a window was his favorite thing, right? And so, a bit like Nick's bard, but predating his, kind of on a little bit of chaotic in it, right? Little playing for the crowd for a little bit of levity, the big gesture, the big deed, right? And now that group, thanks to technology, we are restarting that, not restarting, we're now continuing, restarting that campaign after 15 years, right? So dusted off Eden, and now we're gonna get back into it. And that's gonna be in the Forgotten Realms. And the Forgotten Realms is basically it's a way for whoever owns D&D now, Wizards of the Coast. I don't even know who it is anymore. It's not TRS anymore. They way for them to make money, and they keep changing it, right? Huge changes to this world so that they can sell more books, which are pretty good, and so that they can sell more rule books, which are okay. So one of the things that I don't like about the way that the Forgotten Realms is now is there are too many undead. Oh my goodness. Dragon liches, really? Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Dragon lich? So a lich is a magic user who dies with a lot of power and comes back as an undead sorcerer of just immense power, right? Yeah, terrible, right? Not a good thing to have in a world. Well, now the world's full of them, and the big leaders are dragons, so the most magical beings in many worlds, who were at the top of their power, died, came back, and are now undead dragons with lich power. ouch, ouch. But you can play with it, right? You can see how it creates unlimited storytelling potential, right? And so when you're developing the personality for your character, you can pick, hey, who are the enemies that just really, you can't turn down a fight with them? Who are the ones, what are you most scared of, right? And that's part of the storytelling, right? Yeah. And yeah, so anyway, so that's, did I show you what he looked like? I think I did. Yeah, so yeah, there's Eden. And at that site Hero Forge, you can create it and they'll give you your own JPEG or PNG or some kind of format so you can share it with your friends, post it on Facebook, whatever. You can use it when you're playing online. And you can also, if you're old school, you can have them craft an actual 3-dimensional miniature, complete with color, and mail it to you for Christmas. How do I know? Yeah, don't ask. Yeah, so, yeah, that's pretty cool, right? It used to be the case that you couldn't always buy miniatures. And miniatures, my dear friend, Father Boris Kroner, he plays Warhammer, and he's really into doing miniatures now. Well, I've got miniatures that are from my teenage years, right? Still have them. Y'all, if you want to know why I'm kind of slow, right? Why I don't think so well, it's lead, right? Lead's not a joke, right? Lead really is a problem, and unfortunately, the people who suffer from it are the ones who suffer all the time. Yeah. The poor and the ones that are least able to overcome. But as an evil plot to destroy the intelligence of role-playing gamers, because they're the ones who are most likely to be drawn to the occult and destroy the world, they made early figures out of lead. So you're always handling these lead figures and you're, painting them and kiss my character. Right. Yeah, no joke. And then they switched. Yeah, they switched. They stopped using lead after a while. And these, I'm pretty sure, I bet you they use 3-dimensional printers now. I don't know why you wouldn't. Just create it. Yeah. So I think I've gone over 3 cool things about playing role-playing games. Hopefully I'm starting to sell you on it. When I mentioned the possibility of doing a couple episodes of interviews about Dungeons and Dragons with other priests and stuff for my podcast, Good Guys Wear Black, I got so many things saying, oh yeah, do it. In fact, ask Ancient Faith Radio if they'll let you host one of these podcasts where it's just a recording of y'all playing. I'm like, oh no, that's a little bit too vulnerable. And if people who listen to Ancient Faith Radio get upset that I interview a scientist who has a doctorate in theology about vaccines, or a PhD theologian who's a serious Christian about lay participation in the Jesus prayer, if they get upset about that, yeah, the idea of them hearing just, priests relaxing and being silly around a D&D game, yeah, that's done. So, not going to happen. It could happen on my own podcast and on this live stream because I don't have an editor. So if you listen to Orthoanalytica, yeah, there's no filter. I think there are about 5 shows. I started in 2008. There are 5 shows that I couldn't publish or that I took down later. That shows how big the holes in the filter are, because those are not all quality shows. They're just me doing what I've done today, just talking. So how can you get into this? Well, I bet you have a friend at your parish who plays. I bet you do, right? And if you're one of these guys, you're like, man, I haven't played in 30 years, man, but I really enjoyed it as a kid. That was, set up a game for your kids. And if you've got a cool priest, I'm going to call out all the non-cool priests. If you got a cool priest, you're trying to create a situation, a way to get kids, interested in stuff. Maybe play a game that includes some of the kids and adults from your parish community. Now you got to be careful with that, right? You got to be careful with that. And, I'm not saying, so that nobody calls me, I'm not saying that, oh, you shouldn't, you shouldn't do that. Everything you do as a church should be theological or liturgical. Yeah, okay, fine. Have fun with that. I also eat and play games. It's nice if I eat and play games with people who share similar beliefs and, interests. That's just the way the world is. So, and if you're good, you can bring in theological content. So, why is it that so many of us who, I'm not good at it, I'm an amateur theologian, right? I try to pray and I try to think about God and write about God. There are others who are much better at it, who write about how good it is for us as people trying to be human, virtuous humans growing through the Spirit in Christ, right? So specifically Christian humans. Why it's so good to read Narnia. Okay, Narnia, that's easy because it's an allegory, right? But also Tolkien, also Rowling's. Why is it so good for us to read this? Even good secular fiction. Y'all, if you saw, I'm always reading books, all right? Always reading books. The books that really use the imagination in a way that allows you to point at the questions of good and evil, virtue and vice, failing, repentance, the hero's journey, however you want to put it, that allows you to struggle with that, right? That's all to the good, because then you get out there in the world and you've already got these ideas, you've already got the muscle memory for how to do it, right? And if you're one of these, King James only, all that's present in the Bible, God bless you. For my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, that really was it, right? And so you just explore those. And if you look, for millennia, that's how it was done within certain cultures. And that's why, man, if you read Jewish folk tales, awesome, right? Because take some of the ideas that are just hinted at in the Bible and runs with them. Where do you think, so Gollum, right? You know what a Gollum is. And here, no, not Lord of the Rings. That was the noise he made was Gollum, right? He was not a Gollum. A Gollum is a simulacrum. It's a construct that has some kind of magical energy put into it, right? Where did we get this concept in its fantasy form? As far as I know, we got it from Jewish fantasy, right? And a lot of those revolve around Bible stories. It's fantastic stuff. Anyways, but the same reason that I want my kids. I love that my kids are reading and that they just read everything. They read Sanderson, they read Tolkien, they read it's great. We read and we listen to it. If my kid asks for a book, whether it's a physical book, a Kindle book, or an audio book, I don't care how little the bank account is at that time, I'm going to find a way to make that happen. They're getting that book, right? Why? Because it's so much a part of the building of human character, right? That is what is available in role-playing games. Now, if you have a game master who is manipulative, who is about power, who is subversive, who is trying to implant wrong ideas, like Pullman, right? Like some authors do, right? Well, yeah, of course, it's not going to be enjoyable and it may not be edifying, right? Right? So what? But if a character wants to experiment with, hey, what's it like to run an evil character? What is it like to run a character that has some vices that they haven't really dealt with? This is the opportunity to do it. Just like it's the opportunity when you read a book to read about it. Yeah? Do you take ownership of that character when you read about it? In a way you do, right? Because that's the way that empathy works, right? That's the way that we create these avatars. Our minds are filled with innumerable characters and worlds and situations. right? But the other players and the game master get to help you work out what that looks like. And man, sometimes it doesn't, by the way. We played a campaign when I was in Pennsylvania, and one of the players decided to play just a truly chaotic character, right, who is antisocial. Because, and it was hard. It was hard because that character, being in character, was just trying to break up the party, right? No fun. That got old really quick. So, some things you can't really, they don't work in the setting. But I don't have the skills. I like the idea of writing books, but I don't have the skills. I'm more of a people person. I learn, my best work as a theologian is in interaction with others, as a teacher and as a student and as just a conversator, right? It's the same for me when it comes to writing that kind of heroic fiction, right? I'm never going to have the skills, the patience to be able to write something good. My son Nicholas, he does, right? He's getting a master's along with his physician's assistant's degree. He's getting a master's in creative writing. And his teacher said, look, you should send this one out for publication. It's ready. This is good. Anyways, he's like that, right? But I'm not. But being in that moment of joy where people are feeling out these different concepts and ideas in a world that you've come up with, there's a lot of joy there. And there's a lot of joy there. It resonates with something that really is good and pure within our psyche, right? And that is our calling as creator. And it's not a one-off. This is not like, pornography, right, is to marital sex. It's not like that, right? Because you could say that. You could say, well, you should be acting as a creator out in your garden. And I was teasing my good friend, Deacon Michael Abramson, about, hey, is the reason that you're so good at your garden this year because you've mastered these different games about gardening, right? And I've told you about how the moment when my second son, who just loves Minecraft, he used to love Minecraft, the first time he held a pick in his hand, right? And you saw, hey, how's this going to go? Right? He took a few swings and he's like, no, that's not my creator role. Right? You could say that. You could say, no, you need to be building real stories. You need to be building real relationships, real communication, real virtue, real repentance, the real hero's journey. Okay, that's nonsense. Because the time that you're spending with the other gamers in that game, yes, the situation is made up, but even there, something is going on. But there's a meta setting. People are communicating, right? That's real. It's like, now it doesn't have all the components of real reality, right? Office politics or something like that, right? Maybe that's better. But it's the honest business of people getting along, people learning to share their lives, people growing in the unity that God desires us to have with one another as He has with Himself. Yeah? How is that accomplished? Is it just by, fixing a car together? Well, yeah, it can be done fixing a car together. Is it better for it to be done playing soccer than it is playing a game? In some ways, yeah. In some ways, no. Right? Dungeons and Dragons allows people who aren't good at games, aren't good at physical games, to experience some of the pleasures, some of the heartbreak that those of us who are more physically active experience playing yard football. Right? It's there. It's there. Don't poo-poo it. And I don't think we should poo-poo the online experience of gaming. Right? I was telling you before, you don't know how kids are experiencing this. It's different than you and I would experience, I guarantee you, because it's been part of their formative experience. I've used this analogy before. We're almost done, I know. We didn't even get really to Orthodoxy. We did a little bit of political science, a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, a little bit of Orthodoxy. So I was an intelligence analyst for a while, right? Pretty good while. And before that, I was trained as a methodologist, as a political scientist, right, at Ohio State. And I would pick up tools that would help me be a better analyst. But the analysis actually took place in my head because of the way that I had studied comparative politics and the analysis of variance, right? That's just the way I'm wired. And then learning things like statistics and other things like network analysis, putting it on a screen, or like GIS layers, right? These were things that allowed me to better do that analysis of variance that was going on in my head, right? When an analyst learns how to do that work, and as they're learning it, they're using these technologies, then those technologies become part of the way that they experience the problem solving, right? It was very different. The way that I saw this, especially in Afghanistan, because I, a more experienced warrant officer working in the intel shop, was working right next to like 19-year-olds, geniuses, right, who had never studied analysis or political science. They got a 3-month school, maybe a 6-month school in order of battle and stuff like that. And they'd get out there and they'd have these tools, and they were just, man, they were making leaps that they could explain to me, but I would have had to come to them a different way. But for them, they became obvious through the manipulation because they were thinking with the machine, not using the machine to help them think. Does that make sense? It's similar. I think that's similar to how people are experiencing online stuff. So, I don't understand. I don't know for sure what it's going to do to people. And here, to tie it all in a bow, as we conclude, with role-playing, technology is playing a bigger role, or it can play a bigger role. When I started out, this was the 80s, this was the 90s, even in the 2000s, it was all of us around a table, and it was very physical. You had dice, you had the ideas, and the ideas were written in numbers and words on your character sheet and in the stories that you told. Now some of that, and especially the math part and the communication part even, is being moved into technology. So my oldest son, for our family game, my oldest son and his friend, they're part of our regular game, and we bring them in through technology so they can see what's going on the table, because every once in a while we'll use the table just to kind of show where things are. And so they can see each other's faces, and it helps with the interaction. Well, now we're switching over to a technology where there are maps and things on the computer. Everyone's going to have a screen in front of them, even when we're around the same table, so they have a common vision. That's going to change how this works, right? And I'm a little bit worried because I really like leaving a lot of space for their head to come up with, to fill it with, right? So when your character is in a dungeon, for example, all the dungeon master has to do is say, look, it's an irregular dungeon, it's musty smelling, it's damp, the floor is irregular. And then the person, when they're imagining what their character is going through, it's not those details, it's an image, it's a smell, it's a sense that their mind has come up with, right, to populate and explain this world. And so I'm interested in seeing what happens when everyone has, a picture of the map. We'll see. I'm sure it'll be just fine. Anyways, I appreciate y'all being with me and sitting through this with me. If you'd like more on this, you have some themes that I didn't hit that you want to see hit, hey, I'd love to have you on my show. I'll talk to you about it. Or just send me the ideas and I'll flesh them out. If you have people you'd like to see me talk to about it, bring on to the show, I'd love to do that. These are things that I enjoy. And done well, they're all done to the glory of God and the building of this harmony in the world. All right, that's about all I got time for, because now I need to write some papers because it's the end of the semester. Remember, sorry about that. You should never do that. Everyone's packed up their bags and left. So this coming Friday, I'm going to interview Dr. George Stavros, who is a psychologist, and he wrote this wonderful article published on Public Orthodoxy about clerics as an endangered species, priests as an endangered species, and about the struggles that they're going through in their psyches, right? And about how we can help care for them, and how priests need to care for themselves, and how we all, as the royal priesthood, are involved in that same kind of challenge. And then on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, I'm going to have, get this, Adam DeVille. Yeah, so Adam DeVille, he's a Roman Catholic moral theologian, and his most notable work is on the sexual corruption within the priesthood of the Roman Catholic Church. And just his work on that is just crystal clear and devastating, right? Very hard. And he is a serious man, a man of prayer and a man of experience. And so writing that book and knowing what he knows about the world, he's had to develop a certain way of taking care of himself, right? And there's a resistance to that. Anyway, so he wrote this wonderful essay recently on how to understand self-care in a way that it's not selfish, right? Because it's necessary, right? And if you, as someone interested in virtue, think that taking care of yourself is a vice, you're either not going to do it or you're going to feel guilty about doing it, so you're not going to do it well, you're not going to get all of its benefits, right? And so he frames it in a way, he says, look, not only is it necessary, it's part of our, ascetic development, and it's required for us to be able to love, to do the work as stewards, as logosers, of harmonizers. It's required. So anyways, fantastic theologian. I love his work. I was so happy when he responded to my request to come on the show. So there's something to look forward to. Until then, Godspeed.